Um, I'm going to start the meeting. The chair calls the meeting to order. This is July the 9th, 2026. The meeting, American Lake Management District Number 1 at 4 p.m. It's 4:04 that the meeting starts. And I would like Katie Foster to read the roll call
Kate Reed,
here.
Kurt Spingath,
Here.
Jeff Cox, Eric Schmidt, absent Weston Ott,
Here.
and Todd Zukowski. Todd, can you hear us okay? Thought it was. Can you chat, Todd? We are not able to hear you. We have a quorum. We can go forward.
The chair requests Katie Foster to present item 1 and 1A, and the board will discuss afterwards. The first item is the review of the spring survey and the funds available for the treatment.
The spring survey report was prepared by Terry McNabb from Aquatechnics and sent to us on June 30th, 2026. The Aquatechnics crew visited American Lake several times, first on June 18th, then on June 23rd, and finally on June 28th. During the first two site visits, they were able to work from about 7 a.m. until noon before the wind made visual inspection hard to accomplish accurately. Aquatechnics used a combination of bio-based mapping and visual surveying to determine where the Eurasian water milfoil is. The findings show that the majority of the LMD zones are fairly clear of milfoil, with a few small exceptions. The areas on the south side of the shore are predominantly full of native pondweeds and allodia, with filamentous algae sitting on top of much of the vegetation. The North Shore in the LMD zone is also in that condition, but is less densely populated with much less algae. The bio-based mapping showed that, with very few exceptions, the plant growth is currently present in the lower 30% of the water column. The military zones have more milfoil present, generally in the areas that haven't been treated in a year or more. In some zones treated last year, the milfoil crop is significantly reduced, but there are a few plants here and there. The recommended treatment map shown at the end of the survey has the proposed is shown at the end of the survey, but the proposed treatment acres are as follows. LMD and Camp Murray waters have 5.84 acres, and the JBLM properties have 19.5 acres.
Does anyone have any other comments on the survey?
I have some questions. The limited amount of milfoil they said they saw in the areas not recommended for treatment or not specified for treatment, did they feel they needed to resurvey those later to get a better handle on how much is really there? Or did they not feel they needed to resurvey?
Supposed to be another survey coming up. Just what they said in the report.
So Jeff, on page 3, under the table, one of Terry's recommendations would be to come back and survey after the treatment. We weren't able to get Terry before the meeting to find out if he could also do a second treatment, because if you survey and you find the milfoil, the best course of action, of course, would be to treat. So we'll get an answer on that probably in the next week's time.
Okay,
But
from,
he's proposing to come back for another survey. And later on, you'll see in the budget, there's sufficient funds to bring him back, for another survey.
so from visual inspection of our docks over near Bill's Boathouse, there's some significant milfoil in around those docks that's not represented in his survey. I can add that comment. The other question I had, Weston, was based on the acreages he gave you, and excluding the federal property, because that would be reimbursable to the city, what's the estimated cost for the treatment program for the acreages within the LMD? Do you know?
Okay.
Give me just a minute to calculate.
The old one was $7.75 an acre, so I think, so 2.5 is showing it on the LMD side. I think it'll grow.
Just for clarification, Camp Murray is in the ALMD.
Oh, that's right.
So there would be the combination of the first 2 rows of table 1. So you're looking at roughly 6 acres of treatment.
So the most recent addendum from Aquatechnics has milfoil at $950 an acre. I can pull that up if you guys like. It's on the city website. But that brings us to approximately $5,548 to treat the LMD zones.
And Weston, technical question for you. Does the city have to have enough money in the LMD budget to pay for the whole treatment and then in the future get reimbursed by the federal property? Or can you proceed, in this case, there might be enough anyway, but can you proceed if you know you're going to get reimbursed a certain amount from the federal piece of the treatment?
So currently, that's how it's working. The city does an addendum with Terry for treatment on the JBLM VA property with the understanding that they will pay back dollar for dollar or like for like.
Okay.
There any other questions on the treatment, or the treatment is going to be is scheduled for?
The treatment is not yet scheduled.
And it's weather permitting anyway.
Right.
Correct.
For item 1B, Jeff, do you have comments on the historical water quality data sources for American Lake?
Well, I'm trying to collect all the water quality data that I can find on American Lake. I have received the data that was collected for the Pierce County Conservation District that Don Russell helped collect, that the American Lake Improvement Club is now collecting. Some of it I've received from Kurt. Some of it I've received from Marcy Williams, who is assisting with that. I have received the executive summary, but no data for the Cramerton and Mayo surveys that were done back in 98 or 99, I think it was. And I've received that executive summary from Stan Kovar and from Kurt. And I know about the Woodward-Clyde sampling of phosphorus in wells around the lake, but not in the lake. I'm interested if anybody else knows of other actual water quality data for the lake or the sediments in the lake, including if anyone knows if Pierce County Health might have a record of when algal blooms occurred and which ones were tested and found toxic over the last how many years that they might have data, or if any other source like Department of Ecology, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, anybody else might have actual water quality data on the lake. And I reached out to different people. I actually went and sat down with Don Russell and Stan Kovar and looked at the data and notebook that Don has. But I'm interested in actually gathering up that data. So the discussion I'd love to have is if anybody knows of additional data sources or how to get the actual Kramer-Chinnon Mayo survey data that was collected, I think, monthly for a year. I'd love to get my hands on that data, but so far I haven't found anybody that either has that data or is pointing me to other data, water quality data sources for the lake.
We have a summary of the KCM data done in 1996. Have the actual study, but it is available through, I think Stan found it through Freedom of Information Act. And he asked us if we had that. And I said, no, we don't have that particular one. And it costs, he said it's $100 to be able to get that. That would be add to our amount of knowledge. The data that we got from Pierce County has some phosphorus data from 2000 through 2018 that was collected shallow and deep in alternate months through those summer months, like 4 months out of
Yeah, and you provided me that data.
got that to you. And the only other thing that we're doing now is a current sampling that we're doing on American Lake. We are doing deep and shallow samples again, but we're getting those analyzed privately, not sending them into. But we are collecting that, so at least it's some kind of a baseline that we're getting back to collecting, because that hasn't been collected since 2018.
Yeah. So if any other data sources become knowledgeable to anybody, I would be very interested.
If that is the direction of the board, it is our job to get you the information that you want for your meetings. So if you have the consensus of the board that you want any data that we can find, we can certainly go about the business of finding it. The health department, for example, is required to give things away as public documents because they're a public entity. So we'd be happy to report back to you what we're able to find and where we looked, and we're happy to take suggestions from you on where we should be looking. But that's the work of the city staff for you as the board. So if that information would be helpful to the board and that's the direction of the board, we'll follow that.
I would find it very helpful, especially especially the toxic or the algal blooms and the potential, whether they're toxic or not, to have more of a data record of that. There's a lot of visual observations, but to have a better understanding of that would be useful. If in fact the county, Pierce County Conservation or somebody recorded that, and because of DOE, DNR, and Fish and Wildlife have responsibilities on freshwater lakes, there's a possibility they might have generated some additional data that could give us insight. I don't know that they haven't, but that would be of interest if they do. So,
Jeff, to add to the conversation, ecology would be a good source. One of the reasons Joey Teresi Joey's with Ecology, authorized the sample to be tested near Silcox Island this past winter was simply because there hadn't been a test done in some time. And partly that's due to there hadn't been a significant bloom in some time. So ecology will have some data, but it may not be to the quantity that you're looking for, because it's more of a reactive test than just a standard monthly proactive type testing.
Yeah, I'm aware that the algal blooms and the testing for if they're toxic or not would be on a as observed basis. But I just wonder if anybody's tracked those observations over time to give us a better handle on if there's a particular part of the lake that they occur only in, which we believe is the north end primarily, or just a better understanding of the history of them. We know they occur, we know they're a problem, but any additional insights that data could provide along those lines would be useful.
So I would suggest and probably move at this point, make a motion to direct the city council or the city staff to look into the county health department, conservation district, what we have out there that we could gather that we don't currently have. That would be some historical data on reported testing that's been done that we don't have in our possession.
I'm also happy to help chase it down. I'm happy to coordinate with any of the city staff or whatever to kind of chase these things down.
So Kurt, for just point of clarification, it's any testing data on the lake, regardless if it's, say, pH or all the way through testing for cyanobacteria.
Basically, I'm looking for cyanobacteria testing that people sent in samples over the years, and what the frequency of that is. If the county knows that there's been a frequency of blooms, I'm only aware of wintertime blooms on American Lake, and that's usually November, December, early January type of thing. Typically, that's the most timing that we get cyanobacteria blooms. Whether they're toxic or not, we don't know that either.
Just to set expectations, DOE is the one that authorizes testing, and it's done through the labs at King County.
Right.
And there's not a lot of data for the last, probably 10 years or better. So
That's
just setting
what I'm-
expectations.
That's what I'm expecting as well.
The health department, which City of Lakewood works with closely, when a bloom occurs, that's when, if they're notified, that's when they get City of Lakewood and Department of Ecology involved, and that's when the decision of whether or not a test is made, depending on the bloom. And often the response is to post, for example, at the North End Lake by the boat launch, because the blooms are very small or they dissipate quickly. But then the posting will be there for some
Yeah.
time. So again, staff is happy to go look for what we have available. But just setting expectations
Yeah,
that
I'm
there
aware
may
of
not
two-
be a lot of data.
I'm aware of 2 tests that were sent in this past winter, and to King County, and so that we have that. I think I have that data somewhere in my emails from those around the lake that got the reports back. So
Yeah, that's available.
that's all I'm
Yeah.
aware of at this point.
Hey, Katie, if we ask Todd a question, is he able to respond? Do you know?
Todd.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, finally.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think I was in a tough area. I'm out in the impact area, but now I'm heading back into the office.
Todd,
Wait just 1 second, we're adjusting the volume. We can hear you very loud and clear.
Oh, too loud. All right. Yeah, was that? Sorry, yep. Mic check, mic check. Yeah, was that you, Jeff, that was asking a question?
yeah, my question was, do you know if the fort or the federal government, obviously Veterans Administration or whatever, has done any water quality data collection or testing of the waters of the lake or the Little American Lake over the years?
Yeah.
That's
There might have been when probably back in the early 2000s, our programs were much bigger. We had more government staff. There was a water program specifically looking at different water bodies around JBLM, adjacent to JBLM. There might be some early 2000s data on water quality and water levels even. I could kind of ask the folks that are, I don't even think we have a water program manager anymore. So yeah, I might have to dig around a little bit, but I might be able to find something.
okay. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if there's some data that might be of use.
Right. Yep. Okay, will do.
Thanks.
Other discussion on water quality?
I guess one of the things I wanted to bring up is the interest in the water quality and the past data and any future data collection has to be tied to what would be required by Department of Ecology to be able to put together a cyanobacteria abatement plan or phosphorus abatement or whatever that, however we approach that. So I'd like to be able to maybe have some inquiries down with the Department of Ecology. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're talking about Joey Teresi.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what kind of data we would need, so if we present what we currently have and what we would need in the future to be able to put together a plan and how we'd go about that.
So from the city's standpoint, we've done this in the past for Wahop Lake, and we brought in professional services to assist because that is, a unique skill set to come up with that.
It's also a very expensive alternative to something that we don't have.
Correct. There is a
city-
cost for professional services.
But the city paid for that. We don't have that in any type of budget for the landowners to be able to afford at this point. We don't have anything for that for a $250,000 study. So just for data. So that's what I'm looking for is how can we fill that in without having a substantial expense? I'd rather put money toward treatment rather than studies that just confirm a treatment.
Correct, but often you do sampling and studies in order to determine dosage and treatment method, treatment type. And if those are necessary in order to move forward with treatment, the cost still remains. I think you're asking if DOE would do that work on behalf of the ALMD.
Not really. What I'm saying is that if a plan was put forward for data collection and all that, and the data was collected in a professional way by us, I'm saying by the showrunners, we have enough people that can do that. We have equipment that can do that. And then get those analyzed professionally as anyone else would, rather than the kitchen chemistry that we're currently doing. I'm looking for alternatives to a Brown and Caldwell type study.
Correct, and we wouldn't go forward with a preconceived notion of who to select. It would be a request for qualifications, which Madam City Attorney is going to talk about in her presentation coming up. But those are all good considerations because there is a cost to come up with a treatment, especially if we're treating for nutrients.
I think now might be a good time to mention, we skipped item 1A as well, talking about the LMD budget, if we wanted to go back to that when there's a moment.
Review of funds?
Correct.
Okay, Katie, would you, funds available for the treatment?
Oh, I was asked by Board Member Cox to verify the budgetary details that were provided during the June 4th meeting, specifically the carry forward budget and the amount of funds remaining from the DOE grant. I was able to verify both figures as accurate. The COL assessment transfer funds shown in this budget detail are what the city owed in LMD tax assessments. The revenue is the amount that comes in from the assessments every year. The $23,735 would be the total revenue gained if all assessments were paid. There have consistently been some outstanding liens, so it is possible that the full assessment amount won't be collected. This revenue also does not include any anticipated JBLM funds. This means that there are approximately $61,101.75 available for the LMD.
So Katie, what is that top box up there, this 385, almost 386? What does that come from? I don't,
That is out of the 401-0021, the fund, the LMD fund. That is to date the amount of revenue that has come in and the amount of
that's over
expenditures that have
over the
left.
8 years that we've had.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that was not clear to me.
Just for clarification on that, Kurt, that's total revenue, total expenditure. And
Got
so
it.
that would also include the pass-through funds from JBLM. So that's why you see the number is maybe higher than you would anticipate. But it also does include 2 DOE grants.
So that's from 2019 through 2025, right?
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense now.
So Weston, this is great to see. At one of the previous meetings, I thought the carryover amount was more like 5,000, but these numbers are solid, I guess I should say.
So in the total balance carry forward number for 25 to 26 is larger because we had eligible expenses for the DOE grant. So we went ahead and billed the eligible expenses to put the money into the ALMD budget versus waiting for 2026. And it ended up being a good choice because this year we have a much smaller treatment amount and we wouldn't be able to submit for eligible expenses in 26 because we're not treating as much. We could treat the JBLM portion with the DOE grant. There's no reason we couldn't do that, and I think we should. But that was why that number looks larger than in past years.
Got it. So that the carry forward went up, but the DOE remaining funds went down.
Bingo, yeah.
Thanks. This is a nice number.
Correct, and that gives you the freedom to use the funds how you would want to use them in 26 and going forward.
And if we used all 61,000, then the carryover funds for next year would be, there'd be no carryover funds for next year.
Correct, and so that number is as of January 1st, 2026. So it doesn't take into account funds expended already for city staff to send out assessments,
Understood.
anything we've paid Terry to date, et cetera. So you don't have quite that much as of today.
Understood.
Yeah.
So a question I would pose, but it relates to something we'll talk about later, is if we have this amount of funds that look to be greater than we need at present for the treatment that's been recommended, the treatment acreage has been recommended. I'm very interested to hear from Wendy or Heidi, I'm sorry. If we can open ourselves up to considering other treatments this year, which might be too late, or whether we know we have to spend more potentially on a second treatment this year, so we shouldn't consider other types of treatments, or whether this puts us in a position if there's sufficient carryover to next year, we could begin considering whether next year's work plan might have consideration for other types of treatments. But I know that leads into an agenda item farther down the road, so.
Right, because I think a step would be amendment to the work plan.
Yeah.
No, I'll save it.
So I would think that, that we could do some other, treatment of native, plants that are around docks and things like that that need to be done. Possibly the filamentous algae type of treatment that we could put together a 2027 plan that would include something like that and go through the RPF to find out what that's going to cost us. I suppose that maybe that's the way I know we're going to cover that later, but those are some considerations for any excess carryover for 2027. I probably wouldn't think we'd be able to put it together for 2026.
Just as a comment, I believe you're correct. 2027 is doable. 2026 would be a mad scramble.
Looking at the numbers you had on your presentation.
And amending the work plan
Yes.
and presenting it to council too.
Right.
So, I mean,
That's all
there is
for timing.
that process, yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. This is Todd, JBLM. I know you have us down for just over 19 acres of treatment this year. That's something that we may assess and decide not to treat all of that. So if you guys are looking for other treatment options this year, maybe to cover down on what we decide not to cover from our perspective. But again, I think, before you send Terry out to treat, let's make sure that we're, on the same page with how much we actually, first of all, can afford to treat, and then second, what we want to treat. So,
Hey,
over.
Todd. Yeah, this is Weston. Real quick, could you also give us a little bit of background that some of the changes at the federal level that have affect budget and your ability?
The changes that we're expecting in the next agreement, is that what you're talking about?
Maybe clarify that. Some of the board members are confused why the federal government wouldn't have enough money to treat the lake.
Oh, I just think due to budget constraints this fiscal year, we're still trying to come up with funding for FY24. And I think that, that's still in the legal process, and I think we will get that. But coming into this fiscal year, not having an idea of how much, treatment is going to cost up through, basically July or even into August. That's kind of when our funding cycle was kind of done. If we knew perhaps, or we come up with a standard amount each year early in the fiscal year, that helps us, as far as being able to budget certain expenditures. So, yeah, I can't guarantee that we would pay $20,000 this year to do the treatment for all 19 acres.
Bear in mind, Todd, that anything we don't treat on your end ends up on the other end.
Right, right. That could be a problem. Right,
A huge hit to the rest of us if that doesn't get done.
right. Yep, and I think we realize that.
All right.
So just for clarification, Kurt, with the remaining DOE grant funds, the $8,367, those could be used to treat the JBLM portion.
Yeah.
Because the grant covers
Good
the
idea.
lake in the entirety. So they could, that plus what JBLM could afford, may be able to treat the full amount so that the milfoil doesn't travel to some other portion of the lake.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely seek to pay what is, has been surveyed for. That's definitely our goal, absolutely. And to realize that that's our portion, and hoping to fix some things in the future, realizing that the VA is actually not a part of GBLM, which is kind of a huge issue. And I think we're going to rectify that in the new agreement.
So just to understand, Todd, did you just say that the VA is not ponying up what's contaminated in their areas?
I think we've been paying for them. It's been assumed that the VA has been a part of JBLM when actually it's a completely different organization, federal agency, really. So, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think in this new agreement, we're going to outline that and hopefully get them incorporated as well. We'll do our best to provide them like with a template for an agreement so that it's a little easier for them. But yeah, hopefully getting them on the hook for this as well. I think they have a very small portion, right? What is their acreage or frontage? Does anybody know?
Well, they don't seem to have.
Todd, I don't think that was broken out in the initial breakout of shoreline links in the past.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'm sure that the city's AutoCAD group could calculate that, but I don't know that anybody has that number at offhand.
Sure. Yeah. It's just as long as we, fix it in the new agreement. I think that's kind of what we're looking for.
So, Todd, just for clarification, when you say the new agreement, you mean the next, the assumed next 10 years of it?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So part of that reformation of the ALMD would need to account for an agreement with the VA, an agreement with JBLM.
Yep.
And Camp Murray would continue to be part of the ALMD as they currently are.
That's correct. Yep.
Any other comments? With that, I'd like to call on Heidi Wagner to present item number 2. PowerPoint.
Right. Good evening, Chair Reed and members of the committee. Heidi Wachter, City Attorney, and I'm going to go over some things that you've probably heard before, but I'm going to try and tie in some of the things that you've asked about. So going to the first slide, it's a simple enough statement, but it's just that the Lake Management District is actually a financing tool. And there are several places in state law where financing tools are provided for. The most common one is the local improvement district. If there are people who live on a street, I know of a case in Tacoma years ago where they wanted to put in some kind of cable fiber that wasn't common to neighborhoods. If all the neighbors are willing to pay, they can do that upgrade in their neighborhood and it's not borne by the taxpayers. So in the same way, when folks who live on the lake want to improve the quality of the lake to a level higher than what the city's maintaining, they have a financing tool available to them. There are other ways they could probably do it. Here, what we've done is a lake management district. Essentially, when you create the lake management district, you are setting up a situation where the city will take money from people to do certain work. And that's part of the reason it becomes critical to kind of adhere to a lot of rules, because anytime you give the government the right to take money, you want to make sure that they're doing it for the purposes stated. The city council authorizes taking the money, and the city actually takes the money. And if people don't pay the money, they can do things like lien the property. So it is fairly heavy as far as what kind of power you're giving to the city in that instance. What they take the money for is what they have authorized. And then in turn, what you all put in the work plan. So what they've authorized is, we'll get to in another slide, but they give you kind of an umbrella to work within. And then within that, you create a work plan that then you take back to them and they approve. And that's how they go about the business of taking the money from people to improve the quality of the lake. There's definitely a sense that what's being done, at least depending on who you talk to, is not adequate, or it's not the right thing, or whatever you want to insert there. We've gotten a lot of different feedback. That may be something that serves to do a future lake management district, because you're at the point where this one has started to run its course, and you may want to give some really solid and well thought out input to the city council in order to expand what they're having you do, or what they're allowing you to do. So the advisory committee, as it currently stands, this is not the aspirational state of the advisory committee, it's how the documents have come out. You provide advice to the city council and you represent the property owners. You annually discuss the proposed work program. You give input and suggestions regarding implementation of the work plan, and you work with the city to prepare educational materials. You provide input on an annual report, and you support annual public meeting to brief the residents in a very real way. You are the connection between the lakefront owners and the city council. But the question is then, what can you recommend as currently constituted? This is straight out of the original documents. Ongoing aquatic vegetation management, public education, and other related projects. So the question that's come up is, can it be native plants? Yes. Can it be noxious weeds? Yes. Can it be invasive plants? Yes. I think, I'm not necessarily qualified to render this opinion, but I'm pretty sure cyanobacteria is actually a bacteria and not a plant. That does not mean that future LMDs cannot be formed to address that issue. It's just saying, I don't think it fits within this description. And that's, this was constituted back in 2019. The problem seemed to be milfoil. Committee member Spingath, did you have a question or a?
Yeah, so you're referring to the way we're structured now?
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
100% the way you are structured now. And if you're asking me what could the future hold, the future could hold something very different.
Yeah, so water quality is something that the rest of that falls into, that isn't on this, that isn't authorized under current structure, but could be authorized under a new LMD structure.
Definitely could be.
Right.
Yes. Now, having said that, in order to do the new LMD, what you're going to do is have that conversation again, where you come up with, this is the current state of affairs. Yesterday's problem was milfoil. Today's problem is cyanobacteria or something else. Hey, city council, this is the thing that we really need to treat. There will be some idea of a cost estimate that goes along with that. If it's, depending on the amount, you're ultimately going to have the vote of the lake owners. All the members of the LMD would have to vote on that. But yes, you could change this, frankly, somewhat dramatically from what it is now.
It all kind of comes under the RCW, which also is also included in our resolution.
Right.
On 09 and 15.
So, and it's a really good point that you raised. So the way that it works, I'm a little bit of a municipal geek about this stuff, but the RCW is the really big umbrella. It's saying, hey, cities, if you want to treat a lake, we're going to give you a tool to do that. And then the city said, well, we're really after, I guess at the time it was more like milfoil, but we'll be a little bit broad about it. We'll say aquatic vegetation. And then you guys within the work plan say, and this is the scope of what we want to see done, right? So that's how it works. So within that RCW, there is room to do other types of treatment for sure. So the city takes the money, we put it in a specially designated fund. We can't really spend it on anything else. And we go about the RFP process for getting people to do the treatment on the lake. I will say with this question about excess funds, I would have to do a little bit of legal research about that. If you have excess funds, it is possible you may be able to spend it towards your next LMD or research or something like that, but I think you might have to get council authorization to spend the money differently than what's currently approved. That wouldn't necessarily have to wait until a whole new work plan. But we want to make certain that at each point where you're spending money that you took from the lakefront owners to do certain work, that you're staying true to the mission. And the other thing that happened historically was initially the city loaned money to the LMD in order to get started. And it might actually be that that's the cleaner way to do the start of the new group. I would have to take a look at that to be sure. Obviously, the money is meant to be used to clean the lake. So we would just want to make sure that we have that all sort of nailed down. And when we do any purchasing, especially any kind of a public work, we're required to do competitive bidding. Here it's a request for qualifications. And that means advertising, that means submittal and evaluation, that means meeting contract requirements. The council ultimately reviews the contract. There's typically some type of an interview. This process typically takes 4 to 7 weeks, and it can be frustrating in the length of time it takes, but it is something that binds us. So essentially, I'm just trying to make sure that we're clear on what the differences are between what the advisory committee's role is. You're sort of the subject matter experts on what conditions are most concerning to your members. And the council is the place where the money flows through and the work gets executed on. I think the question about what you could be in the future, I want to make sure you understand that this part of the presentation is about what we currently are. It does not restrict what you would be in the future at all. You could be a completely different looking entity with the understanding that you would want to bring that to the council and explain, yes, milfoil was a big problem, but we have a bigger problem now, and this is what it is, or we want to treat both. It could be any number of things. So with that, you are welcome to plumb the depths of what I don't know about your lakes on this part of the presentation if you have questions.
I do have a question, and I fully understand that we'll be discussing and we can vary this LMD for any future vote of the public and how it might go forward. But my question relates to what we potentially can do next year, because of this year it'd be too hard to do it. So I went back and reviewed the ballot information that went out and the resolution that the city made. And on the ballot, there's no discussion of what the topic is or what the LMD is going to be focused on. But the attachment to it, which was answers to frequently asked questions that accompanied the ballot, stated that that the LMD proposal was for the purpose of raising funds for the sole purpose of treating and controlling invasive aquatic species, as outlined in, and it goes on, as outlined in the Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan. So then in the resolution 15 and 16, the city specifically stated aquatic vegetation management, education, and other related projects. So the other related projects, does that wording allow us to propose next year treatments on like native plants or other plants, or either other water quality issues, or because of the wording of the questions that the thing that it was attached to the ballot, saying that the sole purpose of the money was for treating and controlling invasive aquatic species. Can you clarify exactly that boundary for us?
Committee member Cox and members of the committee, this is the kind of stuff lawyers love to hate. And we hate it because what drives your authority is what's actually been passed by the city council and not the ballots.
Okay.
But what you've told the citizens is what's in the ballots. Citizens are not sitting around reading resolutions and ordinances as much as we might wish they would. They're not always watching the city council meetings to know exactly what was authorized, but they will take a look at what went out in the ballot. And so what you have is a situation where a citizen might reasonably assume we're doing exactly what the ballot said, when what the authority is coming from the council. And so based on the authority that you've been given, you can treat any kind of aquatic vegetation.
Okay, well that matches really the citizen comments that we've been getting, is they want to broaden it. So I'm happy to hear that, because for a long time it's been, at least my interpretation, that because of what was sent out with the ballot, that we were more limited than we are. And it's good to hear that we have a little broader scope that we can consider for next year.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
It's possible that a citizen might say that they had some kind of detrimental reliance on the ballot, but if it wasn't the actual ballot language, if it was just a flyer that went with the ballot, I think that's pretty defensible on our part to rely entirely on the authority granted by the council.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other?
Well, the other question, the ballot said 66 cents a foot. A citizen raised the fact that there may be some flexibility of raising 10% more than that in a year. Is that something that you looked at, and whether that's a possibility or whether we want to consider it?
10%.
I have looked at that, and as an English major, when I read that RCW, I believe what it says is that it is a 10% overall increase. It uses
Yeah.
the term 110%, but it's 110% of the previous charge. So 110% of the previous charge would be 10% more than.
That I understand.
And yes, I think you're able to do that without a vote. However, you're still bound to, right now, your work plan.
Yeah.
You know, if
Okay.
you did something in the next work plan and that gets approved by the council and you need 10% more, you're probably okay. If it's more than that, you've got to go back for the vote.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So we're done with the question. Any more questions?
I had one more question, Heidi. And it has to do with this accidental public meeting situation.
Mhm.
If an email comes out from Katie and says, does the following date work for everybody to hold a meeting?
Mhm.
If we respond individually, I know it doesn't constitute a meeting, but if we CC all, is that endangering us from the concern you have?
Yes, and what I would tell you is, as dumb as that sounds, there are people watching for OPMA violations right now. I think I might have mentioned this to you. I've mentioned it to others. 3 in the last year and a half, from one individual who used to make his name on PRA, Public Records Act cases, is now following OPMA cases. And one example is there was a case out of Walla Walla where they said that their executive session was for the purpose of reducing the number of candidates for city manager. And they came out of executive session, they decided who they wanted, and they appointed their city manager after the executive session. And they got dinged for a violation. So if I sound like I'm really strict about that stuff, it's because there are people out there just looking for ways to get at it. And it's frustrating because the actual penalty on OPMA pales in comparison to the Public Records Act, but it's not fun to be on the receiving end of that. And it does play with the credibility of the body if we have those issues. So Katie and I have talked a lot about meetings, and one of the things we're going to be talking about going forward, we have a lot of meetings we need to do now because we're looking at the idea of getting another LMD going, after this one sunsets. But also for your regular meetings, they probably need to be regular because otherwise they're a special meeting and different rules apply. Did you have a question? Okay.
No, so so following up on what Jeff said, email comes out and says, okay, these are the dates that are available.
Mhm.
I replied all. I saw Jeff replied. I saw Todd replied.
No, I replied only to Katie.
Oh, okay. So I saw a couple others that
Right.
replied all that said, okay, the 23rd was okay, but maybe, that kind of thing. So how do we keep up with, if we have to say back to Katie, how do we know what's going on? If that's your recommendation.
Well, it's Katie's job for you to know what's going on. And so that's a little bit of a work in progress because you guys have been what I call low maintenance for a long time. And now we're having to be a little more structured because we have lots of input and we want to make sure that we get everything and do everything that we're supposed to do. But that really is her job. And Joanna Laverne is actually pretty experienced in supporting boards and commissions. And so we're trying to kind of build that infrastructure into this group so that in the future, you may get a few phone calls, there may be a few emails that go out, but we won't risk violating the OPMA trying to get a meeting set. We may have to learn how to do doodle polls. I don't know what that'll look like.
Sounds
But
like we may need a special meeting just to have a training.
yes. And I think my OPMA training is fabulous, but I will also direct you to some other resources. The AG's office has a couple short videos on that stuff that are helpful too. And the Municipal Research Services Center has an amazing website on all the different areas that you could ever, they have a section on lake management districts. It's not extensive, but they touch on a lot of things. And they do have a handbook for OPMA compliance that's very user-friendly.
So I think it makes it much more difficult to brainstorm ideas or plan things, but I think nobody should CC anybody else.
Correct. But when you're here in the room, especially in a work session, that's part of why we tried to create this meeting, is so that you as a board would have a chance to start saying, this is what we as a board want to see. Have a free-flowing discussion. Tell staff what you need from us. And we're trying to get that piece rolling for you a little bit. And I have mentioned, I don't know if you're all aware, but the next recommendation we have is that the next meeting be exclusively set to listen and bring in anyone who wants to tell you what you need to be doing with the lake, so that we can say that we've heard from everyone. And it's been one of the responses I got is that we may need more than one of those. That's fine. But you as the board determine whether or not that's what you want to see happen next. And we're happy to
It's
do
not
it.
just extra meetings. As I say, 3, it needs to be at different times because not everybody's available
Right.
Right.
4 o'clock. Some people don't get home till 5, and it's not reasonable to cut people out. Even though they can Zoom in, they can do other ways of communication, but a lot of people want to do it in person. So
Right.
we need to be.
At that meeting, do we only listen? Do we have the opportunity to ask questions?
So here's where I'm down on that. I know I frustrate some people when I say this, because I know some of the citizens have asked to be more in a dialogue with you. My preference, at least at the outset, is that we spend some time making sure that everyone has the same understanding of the same facts. And I feel like if we start from dialogue, everybody's coming to the table with their own experience and history and so forth. So maybe we start with hearing from absolutely everyone, hear everything thought they've got about this. And if you have questions, ask the follow-up questions, or if it triggers questions of staff, ask for the follow-up from staff. There may come a point when dialogue would be productive, but it's just typically, in my experience, not super productive if people come in from completely different perspectives from the get-go. That ends up being a very frustrating conversation.
So you're recommending just listening?
Listen to what people have to say. If you need to clarify something, if you say, hey, I didn't understand that last part that you just talked about. Is it true that that's happening every summer? Or is it true that, your pet had a problem in the water? Whatever it is, those kinds of clarifying questions. The intent is, by the end of a listening session, you feel comfortable that you understand what they're saying, their experience is. Whether you agree with it or not, you understand what they're saying. And because they come to the board meetings, they're going to develop an understanding of what you're saying.
Okay, thanks.
And just to clarify the time, we can set the time within a reasonable period. It doesn't have to be 4 o'clock. It could be 7
okay.
o'clock. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's not just
Or
a
6
3-minute.
o'clock
We need
or-
to maybe look at how many people, I don't know how it will work, not knowing how many people will be at each session, but at least having enough time so that people can get their ideas out. Because up till now, it seems that the Lake Management District is in the advisory group and not a lot of input from the citizens.
So, Madam Chair, I think you were mentioning the length of time each person would be able to speak during the listening session.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
You are not required to bind people to 3 minutes, and you are welcome. And I suggest, if people have materials they want to send in advance, I've been saving all the emails. I haven't been keeping up with everything requested in the emails, but I have them all. And I think people should be allowed to send in the materials they want to send in, make a full presentation. If they get us a PowerPoint in time, they can bring in the PowerPoint. What you may want to consider is how long you want, if you're considering more than one session, how long total do you want to spend? And then that will drive how much time, but it can be as much time or as little time as you want, as long as you're not discriminating between presenters. So if you give 5 minutes a person, it's 5 minutes for every person. If it's 10 minutes a person, it's 10 minutes for every person. So if you're anticipating 100 people are going to come talk, do the math and then figure out, how much total time you want to spend on it. But you're not required to limit to 3 minutes. That's the norm for your regular meetings, but we're not in the world of a regular meeting right now.
We have pizza brought in during the meeting?
You can have pizza brought in. If you would like to have snacks, we will figure out a way to get you snacks.
So, but Heidi, at each of the listening sessions, one can't be just 5 minutes, one can't be 10 minutes. It seems that would kind of not be reasonable or fair.
Correct.
Okay.
So if one person only wants to speak for 3 minutes, they can do that. But if you're allowing 10 minutes for anyone, you have to allow 10 minutes for all. I would share with you that 5 minutes is actually a good amount of time. I mean, it's plenty of time to say something. 10 minutes probably gives somebody time to do quite a bit. If you're starting to get into the territory beyond 10 minutes a person, you're going to have a very long night. And the thing that I would say about that is after about the 10th or 12th person that speaks, if they're each speaking for 10 minutes, I doubt that you're going to hear the 12th person as well as you heard the first person. But that doesn't mean you can't set another meeting and have people come back.
So a slightly different question, Madam City Attorney. The start time for the meeting was also an earlier question from the board.
As-
4 o'clock is an arbitrary
Correct.
time.
Yep.
The limitations on that?
No, there's no real limitations on that. You can set the meetings as you wish, as long as these constitute special meetings of your committee. You have to give proper notice. I would credit Katie Foster with getting the materials out and the meeting posted. It was about sometime last week, which is well in advance of what's required under the law. Special meetings require 24 hours notice, and you can only really do the business that you've put on your agenda for the special meeting. I think that that's the real question. If you're moving your time around, you want to make sure that you put word out, you get it on the website, you put the packet out early, those sorts of things. And you want to let people know, if you're letting people submit their own materials in advance, for us to put those into a packet and get it out timely, we're going to want to set a deadline for that. That doesn't mean they can't walk something into you, but if they want you to have time to really look through it, submit it well in advance. So anytime though, morning, noon, evening, whatever, we'll be here. So.
The chair is going to call on Katie again to present the 2026 work plan to discuss adjustments that we might be wanting to make.
The 2026 work plan was reviewed by the City Council on June 12, 2026, and approved during the council meeting on January 20th. The work plan does not restrict herbicide treatments in American Lake to target only Eurasian water milfoil. There are restrictions about what aquatic plants can be treated and how. Those are outlined in the Department of Ecology and are part of the city's aquatic plant and algae management general permit. Included in the agenda packet is an excerpt, from the APAM permit detailing restrictions about treating native plants. That is this slide. The board can recommend the city treats aquatic plants other than Eurasian water milfoil, but it would need to be verified that the work aligns with whatever the current work plan is and that there are enough funds to perform the work. If the 2026 work plan was to be amended, the proposed amendment would have to be reviewed and approved by the City Council before enactment.
Katie, just clarifying question. If something other than milfoil were to be treated with the current aquatic vegetation treatment company, Aquatechnics, the addendum would also have to be adjusted, cover that type of treatment.
That is correct.
One thing I noticed in some of the Terry's I went back to the website, looked at everything that was on our website. I saw some of his previous notifications talked about what would it cost to do the milfoil, and he said we could also do these other projects. We've never done those, and we even well, I can't speak before I got involved in last June, a year ago June, but was there any discussion on whether we should do some of the native nuisance weeds along the way that he suggested?
Nuisance weeds is what? Like
That
iris?
would be, no, nuisance weeds would be natives that are inhibiting swimming
Oh,
or boating or something like that. That's well documented within the AM and also Department of Fish and Wildlife.
To answer that from a historical standpoint, there's been a number of years because the milfoil treatments were effective. We just continued with the milfoil treatment, and those plants weren't really discussed, at least not in detail or in length. The yellow flag iris and the nutria were the only two other items that I remember being discussed over the last 6 years or thereabouts.
Yeah, I just noticed that he mentioned that they could do that kind of work if we asked them to do it. So I'm saying that from a point of view of that it still fits within the scope of our aquatic vegetation management plan. It doesn't have to be specifically milfoil or say the vegetation. That's my reading of it.
Understand. So that's where the direction was, that work plan may need to be adjusted, but you'd also have the contractual side that would need to be addressed for that treatment type, the cost. And then there would also, if it needed, as you mentioned earlier, testing, the design aspect of that treatment, if we were to pick a different native or invasive plant to treat. There would be some steps in there.
So is it proper to say that it's really probably too late for this year to consider putting forth a recommendation in a work plan to treat, modified work plan to treat other things? And that really what we're looking at is taking that into consideration for next year's treatment program? I think you said it'd be an awful big rush to try and do something like that within this year's treatment program, right?
Yeah, I think that's a correct statement. Next year definitely is doable. This year, your two steps would be, one is amend the work plan, and two would be to amend Terry's contract. And both those take council action because his total contract is over $50,000 life to date. So even if it's $5,000, we still have to go back to council for that additional amendment.
So if Terry is proposing a second survey, which would be not a fall survey, but a second survey to see if a second round of treatment should occur for milfoil this year, would that be considered an amendment to the work plan?
But we do have a cost item for a survey, a lake survey,
Mhm.
and we have a cost item for treatment, as well as reports, et cetera. So essentially, we would be paying him for two surveys. Terry put that in there as a question or recommendation in the spring survey. The board would still have to authorize if we wanted a second survey to be done and a second treatment. But we have those items that we can use to do the treatment. They're in that, contractually, they're in the amendment.
So we wouldn't need to go to the council for additional approval?
No, as long as it's within your budget amount, as we've shown that the
Okay.
portion of treatment on the ALMD portion is much smaller than what we had anticipated.
Okay,
I can't remember the cost off the top of my head, but let's say it's $500 for a survey. So
Yeah.
you would pay $1,000 for the survey this year versus 500. That's probably within reason of the work plan.
yeah, especially with the funding you say is available. What, so for this year, it seems to me, given the small area that Terry's actually suggesting we treat, and the fact that I think he indicated it was hard to tell if there was just beginning growth of milfoil in some areas that really need to be rechecked. It seems to me it'd be wise to recommend that he, after the first treatment, probably plan a time to come back and do that second survey and see if any additional treatment's needed this summer for at least the milfoil.
I believe that's a motion the board could make, and if you wanted to go further, we have the fall survey. So you could also supplant that with the second survey if budget were an issue as well, and just use that second survey as your fall survey. That'd be another option. But there is that treatment window, which I can't quote off the top of my
Right.
head. I want to say it's August 15th. Kurt may know, but there is a treatment window in there.
Well, for this year, I think, to me, that sounds like a reasonable approach.
My question would be if JBLM is not going to be treating all the locations, if that's what I heard, and we still have contamination and we have no idea where it's going to float. It seems that doing another survey is fine, but we don't have enough money to treat what we have going on. Am I wrong?
No, I think, I like what Western suggested is using some of the remaining funds from the DOE grant to help supplement any funding shortage from JBLM, if that works out. And then the normal amount of revenue to the LMD is more than sufficient, and the carryover is more than sufficient to handle the LMD portion of the treatment that looks like would have to be done this year. Be more than enough. It could be that more would be needed if a second round of treatment is required, but I like your idea that there's some carryover DOE funds that could be used to help supplement any shortfall from the JBLM side. I think that'd be a reasonable approach.
Yeah, it's definitely within the grant's parameters.
Yes.
The grant doesn't say you have to use it on the ALMD or JBLM, or you have to
Yeah.
use it in American Lake.
So if we had,
That's 8,000.
this 25 acres altogether, essentially $25,000. So that would still leave the rest of the 61,000 minus some other costs that we have, the surveys, those kinds of things.
Well, except you're gonna get reimbursed a significant portion of that from JBLM.
$61 minus 25 minus what, another 5 or 10, or do you have any idea?
Well, we can use some of the numbers from the work plan as well for estimating, but suffice it to say there'd be a positive balance going into 27. We would treat in 27, possibly expand what we treat. And then 28, I believe it's second 28, it sunsets. And I think we had asked that question earlier, that we could still spend those monies to treat in 28, even if the treatment occurred after June 2nd. So you're setting yourself up to have sufficient funds to treat clear into 28. So as long as you're reformed and able to treat in 29, then we're in good shape for the reformation and the continuance of treatment of American.
So Weston, that was my understanding at the last meeting, but let me ask a clarifying question. If the LMD sunsets June of 2028, and as a taxpayer receives my request to provide money to the LMD in mid-June, so in May, would a request for funds be going to the taxpayers in May of 2028? So revenue would be coming into the LMD on 2028?
It's my understanding that the assessment would go out in 28, and
Okay.
then those funds could be used in 28, even after the sunset date.
Okay,
Because the
thank-
treatment window doesn't start till July 1st.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
But regardless, we don't get the surveys done until
Start looking at the sunset of this LMD and new LMD, and that I would suggest that we start meeting more regularly, not once a quarter, and it has to be monthly or every 4 to 6 weeks. We're looking at the end of the year already, that we need to have some plan, because we'll need to have votes on the assessment and what, determining what the costs we're going to be recommending. And a lot of work to do just to get to the next LMD.
you just kind of
Yeah,
brought,
yeah.
you just kind of brought that up just now. What we've done with
Oh, the associated costs,
Bay.
the types of aquatic, well, it's, is there anything more to be said about item A under the work plan, that current adjustments
Well,
that we're going to do?
I would have yellow flag iris for significant amounts. And that's one of the things we could consider. There's purple loosestrife over on Camp Murray that I've seen. The other thing is just the bit of nuisance. People have reported to have problems on their docks. They want to be able to go in and pull it or cut it, whatever they want to do. And some of them are doing some of that on their own. So that's another suggestion that we have as far as being able to include that in.
Are you talking about for this year or for next year?
I'm just in general,
meant-
I'm just saying in general, answering this question of what other plans can we consider?
So
Whether it is it's probably, 2027 would have to be that.
yeah, so I'd make the recommendation for this year, for the treatment of this year, we go along the lines of what we were just discussing about potentially a second follow-up survey and potentially a second treatment. Again, we're focused on the milfoil probably for this year, because to modify beyond the milfoil, probably there's not sufficient time to really pull all that together. But that we do plan for next year to look at including treatments for things beyond the algae, beyond the milfoil, which could include the things that you're describing, but would be still aquatic plants of that nature. And I think I would be in favor of looking at the funding we have and what we can stretch that funding to do for other aquatic plants that are a problem around the lake for next year. And then I'm in favor of looking at how we then further expand the whole MD focus for the renewal period going forward, and what topics we might want to include for that. But for next year, I think to expand it beyond other types of aquatic plants would be difficult. And, but we should consider using what funds we have available to expand to, whether the type of plant that's causing a real big problem over at Eagle Point, whether it be the the other plants you just mentioned, or other potential native plants that are really causing problems around certain kinds of docks or certain areas. That would be my proposal as to kind of how we approach this year, next year, and then get into the discussions of how we open it up potentially even further for the renewal.
Well, my only objection is the plants that Kurt just mentioned, the iris and the loosestrife. If you don't get them before they go to seed, then they're all over. I mean, and I'm a culprit. I know I have yellow flag on my beach. I have 4 plants. I need to get down there and get them out. I think that and we've talked about education of people, and we've talked about work groups going out, and maybe it just takes the residents or the property owners to be aware of what plants are noxious and invasive, and get them out themselves. And someone else, maybe I don't have a boat, but people are out in the boats lots, so they can see what an iris looks like. Yellow strife, it's a purple flowering plant. We need to start dealing with it, educating people. And I know that we've got them on the website, and we've sent the flyer out of noxious things with our assessments. So we need to get people aware of what we're doing and what they need to look at on their beaches, so that we can all work together to keep the lake in a good state.
So I thought the information on the back of the flyer this year was tremendous, and certainly a step in that right direction. And correct me if I'm wrong, but those particular plants, I always find on my beach not coming from underwater. Is that correct?
That's right. They're growing in gravel.
Yeah. So
They're at the lake. They're at the lake's edge. But
so we're probably not going to go and ask a contractor to go around the lake and kind of deal with those. What we're probably want to do is reach out through the connections we all have to the property owners and say, hey, can we make an effort to go get those off the beaches? Certainly I can do that with Silcox Island, but I think what we're looking at is not there might be use of some funds that are appropriate through the education portion of this to try and further educate the public, or try to rally the public to try and go out and get those up the beaches. The best communication for that, I don't know. And we could certainly do that this year through the education portion of our funding.
well, the other thing with that, Jeff, is with our listening sessions that we have,
Mhm.
we can make it a point that we can point out to the residents, if you see these, and we can have something up on the screen, if you see these plants on your beach, weed them out and throw them in, not in the yard waste, but in the garbage.
Great.
I think that we need to start looking at the opportunities we have with our limited outreach.
Sounds good.
I think if I look at what work under A, all 3 of those items, we talked about the plans, process for 2026 work plan. I think what we've discovered is that we're really kind of beyond any 2026 adjustments, other than possibly doing more milfoil if we have to do that. But I would suggest that we kind of put off any additional costs for 2026 that would be including other types of projects, and look at pushing everything that consideration to 2027.
Seems like a reasonable and achievable plan.
I have a technical question, Kurt.
What's that?
Which I have a technical question for you,
Okay.
which I think an audience member also knows. I took our float boat over and went around helping somebody launch a boat over at the Camp Murray Public Landing this year, or just over the 4th of July, and then went past Eagle Point and then went behind the 2 small islands there over where Murray Creek comes out. And in the water, it's not really dominated by milfoil, but just dominated by this, looks like an underwater sagebrush type of plant. Big big green plants. And is that the filamentous algae you're talking about?
Filamentous algae would be kind of a
Sugar green?
stuff that kind of breaks off and floats around. That's what that would be.
So do you know what the plants are that basically like underwater big balls of
So that's part of the naiad. We have
naiad?
populations of a plant called naiad. It's a native plant, but it grows in these big hay balls.
Yeah. So have we heard comments that that's one of the troublesome plants that people are encountering?
It comes loose and floats around and
Because
gets
right,
into people's
because
property.
right now that bay behind those two small islands is full of it.
Yeah, and so I know that the entrance there to Little American Lake, which is full of it last year.
Was
I
it?
didn't see this year so far. It's mostly. So,
And would you know if there's different treatment techniques for naiad than you would for,
there are. I mean, you can still treat it.
okay.
But
But that's,
or wouldn't do anything to it.
okay. So what do we think are the topics we want to consider for the expansion of this going forward in the renewal? I mean, from what I heard from the public, is that not only milfoil would be an issue, other aquatic plants that have become a nuisance are a big topic. The cyanobacteria is a concern to some of the folks, although it's very seasonal, I will say, and not necessarily an effect throughout the lake. Phosphorus is believed to be a primary reason that cyanobacteria can grow as much as it does when it does. It's probably also a contributor to plant growth in the lake because of the nutrient need.
As well as the filamentous algae.
Yeah, so those are the main topics I've heard in the public comments to date, other than lake level. Are those the primary topics that we need to consider in terms of expansion of the LMD focus areas in the future? Have we heard of any others?
My recommendation would be, as Kurt mentioned, native plants that we're able to treat under the permit and the filamentous algae. Address not only Eagle Point, but other places in the lake where it shows up, to have those abilities to treat those items.
Do we want, is it in consideration that the LMD in the future should be inclusive of potentially having lake level as a topic?
I guess,
My recommendation on that is that the lake level is pretty much a done deal. As long as nobody takes boards out or puts boards in, it is a static thing. We're at what the Corps of Engineers decided was a safe level at 233 feet above. And as long as that remains that way, we don't have any issues. What I do have an issue with is if any maintenance needs to be done on that weir, it's on JBLM property, and we don't have no agreement to get on JBLM property to do any maintenance. I know I've sent an email to Todd months ago. I never heard back, asking that question if there was some kind of cooperative agreement that could be made between the American Lake Improvement Club and JBLM to be able to monitor that and to get on at a specific time to be able to maintain that or make changes or whatever it is. So I don't know. That's all I have on that.
I thought Pierce County did a good job in their, well, I'll call it a white paper, explaining ownership and responsibilities related to the weir and the outfall. And those were clearly outside the authority of LMD, and the outfalls outside of the city of Lakewood technically.
That's correct. That's correct. So that's why American Lake Improvement Club has taken on itself as far as to be able to monitor it, but there's no clear way to maintain it. Nobody has clear
Authority.
jurisdiction over that other than it's on JBLM property.
The Pierce County report put the ownership of the weir itself is on Fish and Wildlife.
But they disagree.
I'm just,
I'm in the middle of this, and
Mhm.
we've had reports from them that they don't have it as an asset.
correct. It was clearly built for Fish and Wildlife by the Army Corps at the inception of managing the lake level in the 1950s. That's neither here nor there because it's not being used as a fish weir. It's being used
But it
as.
still doesn't answer the question of how do you do maintenance on that asset that's on JBLM property, and who can go do that?
Yeah, and I think you answered the question. It's JBLM or Pierce County because they have an agreement to maintain that.
Weston,
Okay.
can you send that report? I don't know if I've seen that report.
Yeah, Todd, I'll send that.
Yeah, great. And there shouldn't, we can work out access. If you guys need to, if it's determined who can actually maintain it, we can provide access. I mean, you can go through me and I'll get you a pass and whatever you need to do, go do it. And
All right, that sounds good, Todd. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
Heidi?
I just wanted to interject that for this portion of the agenda, most of what we were looking for is whether there's a will and an interest in having some regular meetings to create the vision for that next LMD and whether we need to start preparing the city council to expect that, to choose the topics before we've really heard from everyone. I mean, some of the topics you already know and you know whether or not you want to include them in your plan. You'll need to actually go through and have all the input and have a discussion amongst yourselves as to what would be recommended to include and what might not be recommended to include. But what we were really looking for is, are you ready to have a few meetings? Are you ready to go to the council and those sorts of things with a different hat on? Because it's going to be more about, this is what we see next for the LMD, a new LMD after this one sunsets, and this is what our recommendation is.
But if I go back to our last meeting, and my suggestion was to have monthly meetings specifically for the 2028 sunset and be able to reauthorize the next session, next one. So that's kind of where I'm still standing on that.
That was also my understanding, is that we would have monthly meetings so that we could scope this out, but we also, two-pronged. One was, will we do something different this year? Probably no. Next year, potentially yes. And how are we going to structure it for the future for putting it back to voters? So yeah, I believe that we, as we are available and not out of town or something, we're going to go to monthly meetings for that purpose, yeah.
I do have a question about the work plan for 2027. If we were to wanted to do something extra and we needed more money that was above the 110%, what would it take, Heidi, for us to be able to change assessment, timing wise, how all that would work? What's your?
You would be wanting or needing to get authority from the city council, and the authority from the city council would be to then have a vote of your members to authorize the extra expenditure. That sort of thing probably takes, I would say, if we were going at a sprint, it would be a 6-month process and more likely to take 8 or 9 months to get through everything, as far as having it ready to go to the council in a form that they could understand why we're changing from our previous work plan and why they're going to be asking for extra assessments. And then you'd want some time to make sure that the people who are voting understand what they're voting for. And I'm not sure about exactly what all coordination is needed, but I think we have to coordinate with the county to do a proper election.
In addition, this is a council budget year. The council's very busy through November into beginning December. So getting time on council agenda is also at a premium, or it can be.
I would suggest that changing the amount that the voters or that the taxpayers are seeing now for next year would be quite a surprise to many of them. And maybe not a smart thing to do. But that if we want to see us raise more money in the future before this particular LMD runs out, then what we would potentially want to do is package what we think a new LMD should do, the funding necessary to do it, and recommend to the city council that potentially they put it to the vote a year early and start end this one a year early and start a new one a year earlier than than the current expiration of this one. That to me would make be a more sensible path if we wanted to try and put to the voters a request for additional funding, is to give them a whole package of an expanded LMD program, and maybe it starts a year earlier than anticipated. So if we were to choose to do make that kind of a recommendation.
I think that after the listening sessions, we have a better idea of where we're going.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know, the 10%, well, 10% on 66 cents is not a lot. It would help a little bit, but not a lot. But certainly listening to and encouraging more participation from property owners is going to be essential for the success of this program. So,
Sure.
um,
But it could be we're in a good position to have some good carryover funds for next year where you wouldn't necessarily need to raise an additional 10%. Of course, that wouldn't hurt to tackling other issues, but if we didn't provide advance notice that the city was going to tax, that the amount people were going to pay was a little bit different than what they had been paying for the last 7 or 8 years, that might be a surprise to the taxpayers that you don't want to present them. It may not be a lot of dollars, but advance warning on everything. Advance warning is always a good thing if something's going to change. Let's put it that way.
Maybe another way to look at that, Jeff, is to pick your battle. In other words, reformation of the ALMD first versus a slight change in budget for next year.
Yeah, maybe that's probably a good way to state it too, because a slight change in budget may not do us a whole lot of good.
Exactly.
Maybe it's just better to focus our efforts on what do we think the carry-on LMD should be. What do we recommend it should be that the city council needs to look at, and hopefully the voters would approve. So, and in thinking towards those items, I was thinking today we could at least express if we had heard of other topic areas that we think the public or ourselves might want to see the LMD expanded to, so that we can have some time to digest that more than we have already. And but for the next meeting, have whatever thoughts we have better prepared for the discussion for the expanded LMD, or for the renewal LMD, I should say. I am assuming that we're going to want to expand its focus, but I guess that's my assumption. So.
But with the upcoming listening session potentially towards the end of the month, which is only a couple of weeks away, after that, we'll probably have a good feel for those that are most interested, vocal, and active on the lake.
So in preparation for that, here's a question I could anticipate, or a discussion I could anticipate from the public, and that is a underlying reason that we have some water quality degradation or aquatic more aquatic plants and some cyanobacteria than we want is because of the nitrates, the nitrogen and the phosphorus levels in the lake at certain periods of the time. And those are more controlled by the amount in the groundwater flow between the lakes and the whole region, and in other sources into the lake, septics or whatever, as well as what's stored in the sediments. If you really want to tackle some of that, the reduction of septics is a portion of the effort to do that. But certainly you start expanding the discussion to, well, will the city or the county be expanding the amount of area that's going to get sewered around the lake anytime soon? That's really not been the focus of the LMD, but it certainly could be an element that comes up in the discussions of what can the city do, the LMD do to further help reduce the amount of nutrients that reach the lake. And that starts to get into the engineering side of things or the future planning of treatment facilities and sewers and things of that nature around the lake. And does the city have a good feel for when you think or when is planned to potentially have sewers clear around the lake? You know?
That's a county thing. And was talking to Heidi earlier. And, you know, if that's the focus of the LMD, that we think that getting rid of septic tanks and drain fields near the lake, we need to put together some kind of letter together and then go to council and get their support so that we can move forward toward the county.
I don't know that should be a focus of the LMD, but I mean that.
Well, it's impacting our lake.
If there's an impact to it, then I guess how much the LMD would be involved in those kind of discussions might come up.
I would think that our only input on that would be a recommendation to the city council to do something beyond what we can do, and then it's out of our hands.
If it's a concern of ours, then
It
taking
is a
it to
concern.
council or forming some kind of written document and submitting it to the council for their review and support, so that they could, because we don't go to the county and make a request. I would think that we would want the council's support.
So a little background to help frame the conversation, especially if the board is going to discuss this with council. In 2005 or thereabouts, the city began the process, even though the city does not have the sewer utility, that's Pierce County Sewers Utility. Tillicum and Woodbrook were unsewered. So they recognized both the water quality of American Lake, because that was the last area that wasn't sewered, or at least sewered to the area, but also economic development or what you can do with the property. So the city, through Public Works Trust Fund loans and other grants, pulled together, again, don't quote me on the exact amount, but it was north of 20 million, and built the sewer system in Tillicum and Woodbrook. Sewer system there is very difficult. That's why it hadn't been built. There's 3 pump stations that were built, and there's a dual force main that runs over a mile from Tillicum up to Ponders. That's the discharge point. So what was built starting in the 2010 period and going forward was the trunk line that ringed all of Woodbrook and all of Tillicum. So that's your, Thorne, Union, Berkeley, Portland. And then you've seen, like even recently, sewer projects that are going forward in Tillicum. And that's done with sewer availability funds plus grant funds from Pierce County. And there was some ARPA funds as well, I believe, used. So since that time, you'll continue to see the city is building portions of sewer in Tillicum. Woodbrook is built out now. And then once that is completed, it's turned over to Pierce County. Pierce County owns and operates the sewer system.
When they finish that, I'm aware of that because of,
Understood.
it's they're going down our roads right, or the landside roads right now. When they finish that, will that actually finish the sewers on all the, what I'll call the public lands, not the ford, obviously, but on all the public lands surrounding the lake?
So there's a couple steps. One is you get the sewer trunk line in the road right
Right,
away.
right.
And you build side sewer, and not all of Tillicum is built. Once that's in, then there's that connection of the property to the sewer.
Right,
There is an option to pay the sewer availability fee. In other words, if you can't afford the cost to connect and you have a functioning septic system, you can go 5 years plus up to an additional 5-year extension before you are mandatory have to connect to sewer. However, there's other properties along the lake that don't have sewer currently built in front of them, and they're under no there's nothing to force them to connect to sewer.
yeah, okay.
But I guess to summarize, the city has done considerable effort, and that's also been funded
Yeah.
by Pierce County.
Yeah.
So that might help frame the conversation for the request. It sounds
Yeah,
like the request is additional sewer extensions within Tillicum.
Yeah, I realize the city's done quite a lot, and and even if everybody hooked up to the sewers, there's enough, from the studies, it looks like there's enough nitrogen and phosphate in the groundwater and the glacial till that it's still going to come into the lakes. It's not just a septic program. And there's no really good way to tackle that, I would think.
Yeah, fertilizer runoff from landscaping.
Yeah.
I mean, the point sources become pretty large.
Yeah.
One thing that helps American Lake are on high water years, you have the outflow through the weir and out to the creek. But we've had this last, 5-6 years of low rainfall, low lake level.
Right.
And now you're seeing some of the issues again that are most likely a contributing factor is the low rainfall and low flushing of the lake.
Heidi?
You ready to say something?
Yes, Commissioner Cox and members of the commission or committee, I wanted to underscore that you may hear any number of ideas as you take input from the people who live around the lake. Some of them may not be workable. Some of them may not be desirable. Some of them you may feel aren't within the purview of the Lake Management District. You may not agree on some of the input that you get. Some of you may think the idea is great. Another one of you thinks the idea is the worst thing you've ever heard. Some of you may think it's a good idea, but it's going to be too expensive. You'll hear all manner of things. And so it might be something about the septic system or what have you. But once you've let all of your members have their say of whatever they want to say, the next step is going to be figuring out of all those things. You're not just here to grant 3 wishes from the members of the management district. You're here to actually manage the lake. So there will be a bit of a tedious process there, selecting what's going to go into the next LMD from that, but it gives you a launching place. It may be that you hear some ideas that are great, but you need some support for them. You need us to go do some background work on the ideas that you've gathered. So I just wanted to manage some expectations that way.
Understood.
Do we have any written information to help us follow steps of the LMD? Do you have anything like that?
Commissioner.
You're on 3B, it sounds like.
What I'm trying to do right now is cobble together how we built the LMD in the first place, and I do have some documentation of that. It's obviously a process that involves first figuring out what you'd actually want to do with the new LMD, and then it does get submitted to the city council for follow-up from there. But I can be prepared to give you an outline of exactly what those steps are. It may take me another week or so because it's going into the Wayback Machine from when the first one was started. But it does begin with what are you actually trying to do on the lake and how much is it going to cost to do it?
Hey, Heidi, if you need some of those early documents, I may have them.
I will take whatever I can get on these things. We've found some of it around here and we probably have all of it somewhere, but if you have it available, I'd be happy to receive it.
Can you send me an email, kind of what you're looking for?
Joanna will be in touch with you in the next day or two and she'll collect what you've got. Thank you.
All right.
Other comments, Kurt? I see that an item D for membership down here.
Yeah, I asked Katie to put that on. Janet's asked the question if we want to consider recommending to the city council, I assume, whether this LMD becomes a member of the Washington State LMD group. And frankly, it sounds like a good idea to me, but I thought it'd be good to at least discuss it and see what other people are thinking on that. And if other people share that same thought, it might be a good idea, should we make a recommendation to the city council that this group join that? Because the more you're involved, if we can send somebody and become involved with a larger group that are trying to manage lakes and get their knowledge, it's usually very useful. So to me, it sounds like a good idea, not very expensive. I know she's raised it at 2 of the previous meetings and it never really had any discussion. So I just thought it'd be good to have a discussion on that.
Can I clarify what agenda item we're on?
We're on 4D.
Did we go through items A through C on agenda 4?
We
Has
did
that
not.
been touched?
No, we haven't.
You have a rogue committee here. You have to rein us in.
Okay, American Lake Improvement Club, grants for lake improvement projects and studies.
I have a little clarification on that. What that really involves is the fact, this is kind of Heidi too, what would happen if a nonprofit like the American Lake Improvement Club have some money that would be available to award for lake management activities? How would that be used within our LMD structure to be able to spend that type of money? I think you've already talked about some of the private money before. Just kind of want to get this.
If a private 501c3 or other type of charitable organization wanted to present a grant opportunity, I can't advise you on what you'd want to do, but I would say that you detail what is required of the grant money. You can restrict it whatever way you want, and then the Lake Management District would look at that grant and decide whether it fits the kind of work they want to do on the lake and probably apply for it.
Okay. I think that answers that question. Thank you.
Well, the item below it is somewhat similar. It's the Eagle Point special assessment. And I think that's something that you would be best able to clarify.
Well, I can clarify what question was asked of me, and it was whether or not you can restrict use of or restrict assessments to a particular segment of your LMD. And I'm not sure that's as easy to do. I think if you are a lake management district, one lake management district, you have one work plan, and whatever's on that work plan gets divided between all of your members. But could the HOA create a grant that the city could apply for? Yes, they could, but, and they could restrict perhaps the way that the funds could be spent. I think that you'd have to be careful about if you're saying, I just want you to do my neighborhood, and that's what the grant is for. We would want to look at being able to track the funds appropriately to that. Typically what a grant is, it can be used on milfoil or it can be used for cyanobacteria. It's not so much you can only spend it on these people. And that's what gets a little trickier.
So if I were to make that little broader statement, a grant could be used for a particular type of application where those applications are needed on
Correct.
the lake.
Correct. Correct.
So
And
I
if
would-
the applications only happen in one part of the lake, but it's part of the overall work plan, you might be able to do
That
that.
could be the cleanest way of doing things rather than the HOA proposing something, to have a nonprofit gather those types of funds and then offer grant money that the city could apply for to be able to do that type of thing. And then how would we fold that into our work plan?
Well, that would be the question. If you have a work plan because you have a large lake and there are different problems around that large lake, you go with the theory that everyone's willing to bear the cost of everything that's around that large lake. And then you could apply for grants, but you can't assume that you're always going to get grant money,
Right.
right? So you would still have to go through your voters to approve the whole work plan. And so there might be some people who look at it and say, that's not a problem on my part of the lake. I'm not voting for the new increased amount because that doesn't
So
apply
this
to
wouldn't
me.
be an increase in assessment. This would be a grant that the city could apply for to add into the funds that we already pay.
Right, so
How does that work?
part of my job is the clouds of doom that could happen in that scenario. When you do your work plan, you go on the theory that you're going to have assessments to cover all the work. You want to apply for the grants for sure, and you want the grants to always be available. If you do a 10-year plan like you did this time, what happens when you're halfway through the work plan and the work plan includes segments around the lake that we're getting grant funding, but then no longer get the grant funding? The grant's no longer available.
So I'm actually asking this from a different point of view.
Okay.
Reverse that point, thought process. When grant monies come available, you don't have it in your work plan, but now we have this money available. Is there a way to?
You shouldn't be applying for a grant that you didn't get authority to do the work from the city council.
Well, what I'm saying is, there's got to be a way to work that scenario.
I think there may be a way to work it in, and it's probably more
That's more of what I'm trying to get
involved
to.
than, but yes, if there's grant money, the sticking point for me on that analysis is that you can't assume a grant will either be available or available to you. I'm in a situation in my department right now where we just came to the end of a grant that we've been relying on for over 20 years. And sometimes that stuff happens. And so you can't make your plan as if the grant will always be there. But I hear what you're saying. And if you know that there's a grant that you could apply for, you could somehow work that into your work plan. Like, you know, if this grant
It
becomes
becomes
available,
Right. If
we can
money is
sort-
available.
we could certainly look at that option.
That's kind of what I'm thinking about is have a work plan with contingencies if money becomes available to be able to do this type of a project. And then if yet money becomes, we get that money in our coffers, then we actually invoke that part of the work plan.
So can you clarify for me, are you talking about getting a grant from a nonprofit or getting a grant from private owners and then somehow putting that money into the LMD funds? Is that okay? Because normally when I think of applying for a grant, you apply to a government agency, DOE, DNR, or somebody, but I hadn't thought about it the way you're thinking about it, so. And that's okay to that the city could take those funds in?
It's obviously going to be case specific as to what the work plan looks like, what the organization looks like, what the
Sure.
grant looks like. But yeah, I think there's a possible road forward there that we could certainly look at.
Okay, thanks.
The issue is more under what conditions would the work be performed if the grant were to dry up?
Sure.
The grant could be written specifically for filamentous algae only.
I had not thought of nonprofits as a potential source of funding for the LMD.
There's a lot of nonprofits that do that. Yeah.
Pierce County Conservation District?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Other comments or that follows in D, E rather.
I think the only comment I would have is, I think the listening session is coming up. And we listened at our last meeting for public comment. There was a very large turnout, to the level of council meetings even. So this next listening session, and then from there, we can move forward with what we want to modify the 2027 work plan, is what I'm hearing kind of as a summary.
Yes.
I think that's reasonable.
And even further on, I mean, putting it together for the 2028 sunset and the new LMD. But what we can tackle now and what we have to kind of like hold off and do later.
One thing I haven't heard was anyone that said, I don't want to see the ALMD reform. But that is, in a sense, a good problem to have. Everyone, not only do they want the ALMD to continue, they want it to do more. So that puts us in a good position when the ballots are mailed out to the residents, that they'll want to support it if what's being treated and the assessment rates are what they feel is reasonable.
So just as a refresher, the voting process for forming this LMD was a little unusual in one respect, as I recall. And I can't remember the details, but as I recall, it wasn't based on the number of shoreline owners necessarily getting a majority of the number of shoreline properties, but it had to do more with the amount of acreage that each of those shoreline property people had. And so it was weighted by acreage. Is that correct? Do you remember?
Way I remember it. So that's why we included the entire country club acreage into that.
Uh-oh. Pfeiffer, would you like to get up and, oh, may I say that? No, I can't do that.
So you can't do that.
I can't do that. Sorry. Sit down.
Well, a refresher on the voting process for forming or putting to the voters the next LMD would be useful, because it might have been a two-stage process. It might have been in a little bit of an unusual process, but it'd be good to have a refresher on that. It wasn't complicated on our end, but it was not straightforward. And if we're doing some planning here, that would be useful to refresh our memories.
And that would be a great agenda item for the August special meeting.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
The August special meeting, Weston? Calling
Well-
our meeting a special meeting?
Well, okay,
Talking
that was
deliberate.
just the word I used for it.
Oh, okay.
Because we're doing interim meetings between the quarterlies to work towards the formation. I use the
Okay.
word special. Someone can correct me on the correct terminology for our meeting.
Well, today's a special meeting, correct?
Correct. All meetings that aren't regular meetings are special meetings.
Even the listening meeting.
Correct.
So do we want to establish that next meeting for the board, advisory board?
You mean the listening meeting?
No, the listening meeting is the
The listening meeting is the 23rd. It's tentatively
23rd.
set for the 23rd.
July.
Correct.
That's the first of several.
Presumably.
Katie, I thought that date wouldn't work.
The 23rd, Kate is not available to make it, but we have received input from other board members that we would have a quorum.
Okay, great. 4 PM?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless the board wants to change that time.
Kate, would you like to move that meeting to later? From your earlier comment?
I would suggest maybe a 5 o'clock meeting, for the simple fact, a lot of people are not available and we want to start capturing more comments and having more input. Does anyone have a objection to moving that meeting of 5 o'clock?
I know, but how's the city staff feel about that?
We work all hours of the evening, so that's not an issue.
What a guy, Weston.
No, what the city does is they want to get as many comments as
Yeah.
possible, or making the meeting as,
Useful to the public as
Available
well.
Yes.
to the public
but
this time.
there was a number of years where we would not receive public comment. And so then the meetings, that's why the 4 o'clock meetings occurred.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, especially for a listening session, a later meeting is definitely warranted. So maybe the board should discuss a time and then vote on that.
Maybe 6
No.
o'clock might be.
No votes, but you can propose a time and I will take it into consideration. Yeah, we can have consensus.
How do we come to consensus?
It sounds like you've just done that and agreed at a 5 PM time. A vote is a more formal action, or a motion and a vote are more formal actions.
5:15.
5:50. Oh,
So as an example, planning commission meets at 6 as an example, or, yeah.
Crab meets at 5. So it is.
5 o'clock is
there any
fine by me.
comment Are there any preferable times?
5 works for me.
The consensus of 5?
5 sounds acceptable.
Todd, can you attend that kind of timing?
Not voting, but I said, yeah, I would agree to that.
Yes. Yeah, I sure can.
Okay, great.
Then the next meeting for the advisory group.
So I'm out of town from August 4th to about the 19th or 20th. Probably the 19th, so in August.
Are you accessible by Zoom? Not,
Probably not.
since that would be the first meeting that we'd start discussing our
Mhm. I'll probably be back and available starting the 20th would be my guess.
August the 20th?
I will look at the council chamber availability for August and I will propose dates based off that. That works.
Thank you, Katie.
And obviously, I don't necessarily have to be here, but I'll just be out of town.
Understood. While we're on item 4, I just want to make sure that everything has been covered. Is there anything the board would like to see for the listening session? Like any sort of materials to send my way, or any
Good.
sort of topics you want addressed during the listening session?
Cookies? Oh, no.
Cookies? Okay.
I'm not sure we want to direct people's comments. I mean, it's about the LMD and what they are looking forward to. And I think that if we start saying you can only talk about these things or those things, it's not a listening session. We're directing it. And maybe I misunderstood you, Katie.
No, that's on me. I should have been more clear about that. The items in number 4 are kind of what we have received from residents, broken down into those categories. With obviously the American Lake Improvement Club wanting to collaborate with the LMD on educational materials, concerns about cyanobacteria and filamentous algae, the request for the board to join WAPA, and the last category is other or miscellaneous. This is like the Northwest Aquatic Management requesting to be added to the city's permit. So basically, we've compiled all these things and we will present like in the packet for the listening session. Had any other materials to?
I can tell you that one thing I expect you're gonna get from some of the members or some of the public is that they want to see the rules and regulations regarding how the LMD board operates and the way the city runs it changed. My interest is in looking at what technically we should propose to do and the funding related to it for water quality issues in the lake. How the city wants to respond to what the public raises as changes in the structure of the LMD board or the way the LMD committee is run, the city runs it, is not an area that I feel knowledgeable to talk about or feels is beyond the purvey of the current board members. And so one, I think somebody from the city will definitely, who would have to address that, needs to be here to hear it. And then the other is that I think the responses or the considerations based on those comments as to what would be considered by the city needs to come from city staff or somebody within the city organization. I don't know that I would feel that, I certainly don't feel that I would be in a position to make a suggestion on some of those comments I am anticipating we're gonna hear. So if that makes sense.
I didn't think that we would be responding, but we're not making a response at the listening session.
No, but in terms of responding when we start to put together what the LMD will do and what the city would allow and all that, what we could consider after that.
Okay.
I think that
Didn't hear
the
the
guidance or what the city would require and or what kind of recommendations they would and would not want to see out of this group for those kind of comments would need to be heard by and clarified by city staff.
And Committee Member Cox and members of the committee, there may be several things that come up where you feel like you want
Yeah.
something more from city staff or who knows, someone else. But if that's the case, just let us know what the things are that you want to hear more of. There may be some things that you're like, no, I really don't need to hear more about that. But if it's something that you want follow-up from and you think
Yeah.
it needs to come from us,
Okay.
that is why we're here.
So there's another question. I'm beginning to feel that there needs to be a preface before the listening, the meeting. And it just needs to be a short presentation of where we were, where we are, and where we'd like to go, and for asking for input from the residents. Any additional comments?
Maybe,
Weston?
maybe one last, I don't want to belabor the meeting, but we talked a little bit about the time for comment and maybe the sense I was getting is 3 minutes may be a little bit short. City attorney suggested 5 minutes is a good number. 10 council usually reserves for like a group. So then if it's individual speaking, that obviously would be a bit long. So would there be consensus for 5 minutes as kind of a limit?
That'd be,
I find that that's a good.
I think that'd be
good
great.
amount of time.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
We need to get them to not vent, but at least give us some of their opinions so that we can make a better determination of where we're going with the LMD. We know it's not going to sunset, but we need their input. We haven't gotten a lot of their input, and I just think it's real necessary, basically being a listening.
I think 5 minutes is reasonable to make a point on I don't want to call it single subject, but on American Lake.
Any other comments for this meeting? I will end the meeting. 17.
Thank you all.